Oh, here we are. This video is a little bit different. We're going to talk. I've been talking for the last couple of weeks. I've mentioned a few times that we're working on a video about what's going on at Sotheby's and at Christie's, for that matter. They're both companies are, I think, in a jam these days. And a report came out a few months back. Some of you may have seen it in the Wall Street Journal and other tabloids, other newspapers published it, that Sotheby's had an 84% drop in revenue for the first 6 months of the year, which is very, very significant, and a 25% decline in earnings, which is catastrophic. And the same was reported for Christie's. There's the estimated losses of earnings there range between 22 and 24%. And as a result, the S&P Global Rating firm that sets the bond rates for companies reduced Sotheby's to basically junk bond status. They labeled them as B-, which is pretty much a disaster. And that was due to the big drop in earnings. And as many of you have heard, was that in August, the owner of Sotheby's, Patrick Drahi, he's a tech mogul from Israel and Monaco. I think he has a home in Switzerland as well, along with his CEO, Charles Stewart, who's a former Morgan Stanley finance guy, who has been his right-hand man with some of his mergers and acquisitions. They went cup in hand basically to the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund and seeking out some sort of a loan or sell part of the company because they had a cash flow problem. They had a significant financial problem, and they wanted $1 billion. And the Abu Dhabi Wealth Fund, known as the ADQ, said that they would get involved with it. And presumably, after they had been refused, not Dubai had been refused, but Mr. Drahi and his group had been refused credit anywhere else for cash because they needed cash, and they were refused it evidently. So they went to Dubai and see what they could get from the Emirates. And the deal apparently was based on a valuation of $3.2 billion, which is what Drahi paid for Sotheby's back when he bought it originally, and he allegedly sold them, or is making a deal to sell them 1/3 of the country for the $1 billion in cash because he's in desperate need of money. Drahi had a net worth of $25 billion in 2015 and has allegedly managed to squander about 90% of it with bad investments and excessive loans and being over-leveraged on debt deals outside of Sotheby's. This has to do with his other business dealings, but it's put him in a horrible position financially. And this is something that's been going on in the background now for months. And then to try and boost consignments earlier this spring, you may recall we talked about how Sotheby's had cut their commission schedules significantly in a bunch of areas. They've cut the overall buyer's premium down. They've cut consignment commissions and so forth. Now, I think that was a good idea. I think that Sotheby's financial problems aside, as auction commissions go in general, I think they've gotten way out of hand, and they're bordering on predatory across the entire industry. And this is mostly due to the cost of doing business has gone up so much with the internet and everything else and all the technology. But there's got to be some give here at some point. But at any rate, they cut the commissions down, and the question is this going to bring in enough stuff for them to sell to pull them back from the abyss? And I'm not so sure it will. And then there are, of course, the circulation of stories around that appear to be true, that Sotheby's has told vendors that they want to wait. They're going to have to wait anywhere up to 6 months to get paid. This is for movers and restoration people and so forth. And the payments, the bonus payments that have been promised executives have all been basically given IOUs or some sort of a note saying, look, we know we owe you the money, but you're not going to get it right now. So the big question is what happened? And, is Sotheby's in financial trouble? What's going on? And what's obvious is that both Sotheby's and Christie's are suffering huge hits in their revenue. And frankly, I believe that both firms have just simply, over the last number of years, lost their way. And they're sort of in a Don Quixote-esque sort of move here to try to scale up their respective businesses to boost income by, they've gotten into selling almost anything that's trendy. This is what's hitting them now, is that they've gotten into selling things that they probably shouldn't sell, things that aren't worthwhile and so forth, which goes way against the grain of the company. And the simple fact of the matter is that some businesses scale up well, others do not. And I don't think that the auction industry is particularly scalable. And I don't think that what they are obviously trying to leverage the company to get as much revenue out of it as they possibly can. And they're doing it by going into all kinds of areas I frankly don't think they belong in. Certain industries do scale up well. Certain industries you can grow them by taking on new types of concepts and ideas to earn revenue and so forth. The tech industry is particularly good at that. The energy sector, the weapons industry, manufacturers of clothing and that sort, automobiles can scale up well, and so forth. And that could be fairly easily done as long as the demand is there. But fine art and antiques is a different thing. Rare books, antiques, vintage jewelry, and so forth simply do not scale up like other businesses who rely only on demand in production capacity. You can't produce antiques, in other words. You have to wait for them to come along to sell them. And so what to do? Well, what Sotheby's and Christie's too is you use your reputation to sell other things that are mass produced, and this is what they've been doing. And then they influence as many nouveau riche buyers into believing that certain designer brands will give you prestige and signal all those about you, that you have arrived. All this sort of pretentious nonsense has been going along, and you let the world know that you are now among the elite, and you can buy handbags and so forth at Sotheby's. And it's worked to some degree because Sotheby's and Christie's are, after all, peddling it. It works. You can do it. And everyone knows that they are the arbiters of all that's tasteful. That's their reputation anyway. So this will work. Well, it lasts as long as it lasts, and then suddenly it doesn't. And mainly because it's all really just a charade trading on their names. That's really what they're doing. And after all, designer brands are mass-produced, unlike fine art. And they can be hawked for large amounts of money if the right people are doing the hawking. And if you have a broad enough pool of wealthy, social climbing people that needing validation, you can do a heck of a job. You can sell a lot of stuff. So what we've seen over the last 10 or so years, it didn't start with Mr. Drahi, but what they did was they sort of accelerated it and put it on steroids. And over the last 10 or so years, we've seen Christie's and Sotheby's both get into these oddball auction items and oddball things that they're trying to peddle all the time. And to me, they've just strayed way off their respective reservations about what they should be selling. And Sotheby's, I think, right now is the most extreme case, but not by much over Christie's. Christie's is doing a lot of it, but Sotheby's has other areas of business that they've gotten into, and we'll get into some of that in a minute. But today, Sotheby's sells a lot of factory-made modern kitchen collectibles and other silliness that are just unrelated to their historic core business. And it's only for one reason. It's for money, period. And that's sort of the whole thing. Image and reputation is sort of like, image and reputation be damned. Let's sell it and see if they can see if we can make some money on this. And we've seen them get into the contemporary handbag and designer handbag market in a big way. All of it's basically new. Some of it's a couple of years old. Some of it may have belonged to some Saudi princess or something. But it's all basically new and barely ever used. And then scarves and accessories and all that rubbish. And then the sneaker market, which they were making a lot of hype out of a couple of years ago. That sneakers were the new big thing. And that market has absolutely cored out. It's just collapsed. The wild prices for sneakers are gone. And then you have the sports memorabilia category, game jerseys and all that sort of thing. And then you have high-end modern watches. And watches have dropped in value by about 50% of the watch market has collapsed since 2020. It's basically gone. And then you have the NFT market, which they tried getting into. That was a calamity. 98% today, they claim that 98% of the NFTs sold a few years ago have lost 100% of their value. 98% of them lost 100% of their value. So if you go back and look at some of the NFT auctions they ran, you can imagine what the losses were. And it's not getting any better. The NFT market is slowly plummeting into a hole. Nobody wants the things, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't think there's much of a future for NFTs because it's garbage. It's not pretty. it's just ridiculous. It's a hype. It's a hype game aimed directly at the people that have bought into Bitcoin and Ethereum and all this other stuff, because it's all tied to the famous blockchain. Everything is about the blockchain, I guess. And then they sell other stuff like wines and liqueurs, and then weekend getaways in partnership with a hotel chain and so forth. And then they're in fine art financing. So if you want to buy something, apparently they can finance your purchase with a loan, and then you leverage the loan with the artwork you're buying as collateral. It's that sort of a thing. And then Sotheby's got into this thing called gem drops. And from what I can see on their website, none of them have sold. They do these single lot sort of auctions called a gem drop. It's sort of a silly name, and you look at the results, and so far I don't see any that have sold. Or maybe they have, they don't publish it, I don't know, but it looks like they haven't. And then you have their cars and real estate division, where they sell in partnership with an automobile auctioneer, exotic cars and Mercedes-Benzes and Ferraris and Porsches and all that. And then they have their real estate division, where they sell, typically higher end homes and so forth. A lot of them are horribly unattractive buildings. I thought when Sotheby's got into the real estate business, that they would be selective about the real estate that they chose to promote. And apparently the only thing that is the prerequisite for being promoted by Sotheby's is a high price tag, not beauty, not architecture, not elegance, not history, none of that. It's just how much is the house worth, or how much do you want for the house. And then they do exhibitions now, sort of taking over the role of art galleries. They always said that they're not, they're just the auctioneers. Well, they've been acting like an art gallery now for some time, and now they do these exhibitions and sales, which is basically a gallery. That's basically what they're doing. They're doing a show, and then they're peddling the artwork afterwards. And then you have their global partnerships, which is a really strange thing. They make deals with, as they put it on their website, like-minded companies trying to get into the auction market. So, a few months ago, they had something on there. They took one of the Genesis automobiles, which are a very nice car, and they got some designer to plaster some sort of coating all over it, some sort of, I forget what they call it, when they put a new skin on the car, and they're doing that to make them look cool. And they're trying to peddle those. And then last but not least is their core business, which of course is fine art and antiques and historic objects and that sort of thing. It's that's sort of like far down the list. What's really interesting was that a couple of years ago, Mr. Stewart, when he took over the role as CEO at Sotheby's, did a half an hour talk on his goals and what he was hoping to do there at Goldman Sachs. And the Goldman Sachs people were asking him, the interviewer asked him a number of questions, and he focused very, very heavily on NFTs and all the things that have been absolute disasters. This is where he thought the company was going, because Mr. Stewart, as far as I know, doesn't know anything about art. He doesn't seem to. He throws out a few big buzzwords, Jackson Pollock and Botero and this and that, but he doesn't seem to be an art guy. I think he's sort of learning it as he goes along so he can sound authoritative on the subject, but he doesn't seem to know much. And I think that's sort of the deal. And the question is, what's next? What are they going to get into next? Are they going to start auctioning off, Tajima Goyu cows from Japan so you can raise your own Kobe beef on your ranch in Montana or Wyoming? Sounds ridiculous, but it's really not. It's completely plausible. Maybe selling heavy equipment designed by Lamborghini. Lamborghini, after all, started as a tractor factory. Maybe they could get them to go out and develop some fancy tractors for you to put on your mansion, on your estate property out west, or maybe in the Hamptons or something, to mow the lawn, look stylish while you're doing that. Or you can get maybe Jeff Bezos to put up his rocket for a 1 hour ride in his rocket ship, and then afterwards you have a luncheon at Stag's Leap Winery in Napa. That sort of thing. The possibilities are endless to things that you can concoct in your mind of expensive things to do. But that seems to be what Sotheby's is focusing on. Just if it's expensive and lavish and show-offy, we want to do it. And the problem is that there's an old adage: when you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to everybody. And this is sort of, I think, the road that Sotheby's is heading on, and why their sales have plummeted so much and why they've gotten hurt. And Sotheby's has a fascinating history. This is the really sad part about it. They were founded in 1744 by a bookseller named Samuel Baker. And he auctioned off rare books. It's a very old company. It's older than the United States. All right, it's a really old company, and they've been around forever. They've been through all kinds of wars, global turmoil, World War II, everything. They've survived, and they go on doing what they're doing. And they've had up years and they've had down years because the antique business is very cyclical. And by the 20th century, Sotheby's was one of the oldest and most storied and most reputable auction houses in the entire world. They and Christie's. They were the leaders in the global auction market. They educated, they did research, they published books. Sotheby's even started a school to educate people. They informed and produced books and catalogs. They brought along collectors, old and new, into their market and taught them about global history and art. And when you went to Sotheby's and Christie's, they always make you feel welcome. I mean, I've been to both companies. They've always been very, very nice over the years and so forth. And they keep you curious. They're enthusiastic about what they were doing and so forth. And then you can stand around and get stunned by all the rarities that they turn up in the history and the research that they've done. And Sotheby's does have one of the best research of the auction houses in the world today. Sotheby's by far has the best research people in the entire industry. That goes without saying. I think they're quite a bit better than Christie's at it, actually. And they were focused on bringing to market the best of the best, from superb works of art by Caravaggio and Jackson Pollock, to fine furniture ranging from the Goddard School, Goddard Townsend School of American Furniture, Louis XV case pieces by Jean Henry Reisner, to Ming Dynasty furniture, compound chests from China, carpets and textiles that covered the floors and walls of royal palaces, the finest silver made by Tiffany and jewelry, and often with all kinds of fascinating provenance of how it was made and why it was made, for whom it was made. And this was their history. This was their legacy. And Sotheby's and Christie's were the tastemakers. They offered things of just stirring beauty and quality, ageless design, rarity, historic merit, that struck a chord for many reasons in combination for hundreds of thousands of collectors. People loved going there and so forth. And that was Sotheby's, and this has been Sotheby's and Christie's wheelhouse for very, very many years. And at one time, they both set the stage and standards for the auction industry itself through the combination of applied good taste, their research, the education that they offered, things that they could tell their customers, things that they made available to them. In other words, they made available things to collectors and dealers that they could easily, and in many instances, be part of a museum collection. If you've ever gone to a museum, you walk through, God, I would love to own that. I would love to buy it. Well, things that you see in museums, you can buy at Christie's and Sotheby's and take them home with you. This is the caliber of stuff that they were known for selling. All right, and they did it all with a great deal of dignity and authority, and they managed to present their offerings in sort of that wonderful classic old style English school thing that wasn't really pretentious or off-putting. It was just a style and a manner and an authority that they spoke with, and that went a long way to building their reputation because they did the work. And they both, until not long ago, stayed in their lanes, so to speak. A lane that they had crafted carefully over hundreds and hundreds of years by selling the finest works of art and antiques, rare art, historical artifacts, and jewelry and all this. And that was their universe. This is what they were in. This is what they did. And my personal view of these firms, or perception was, until not long ago, that Christie's and Sotheby's sold objects of merit. And it's what it's and their view was sort of what it's worth is up to the market to decide on auction day. But they would put things out that they had researched and they felt comfortable in doing it. Okay, they weren't galleries they weren't like the shops on Rodeo Drive or Monaco's Carré d'Or of modern flashy goods that are merely expensive and plastered with logos all over them. They didn't sell sweat-soaked basketball jerseys worn on one game day during a playoff. All right, Sotheby's and their nearest counterpart, Christie's, both for many years enjoyed shared reputations for being leaders, not pandering marketing mills that they are now. And that's what they've turned into, in my opinion, in many ways. In many ways, it's pretty disgraceful to watch. And having now, they've sort of dropped all the pretense of offering anything of enduring value and beauty. It's really about the money. All right, historic interest is out the window. It's about the money. What can they sell it for? What can they get people to pay for it? And this is their business model, and that trades off their carefully established and impeccable reputations by offering, frankly, trivial and vulgar displays of wealth, wanted only by the tasteless. This is the thing that's funny. Nouveau riche buyers that are just, they have a lot of money suddenly. You don't see old, well-educated, sort of classic, entrepreneurial, multi-generational families shopping at Sotheby's like they used to. It's a new generation. It's new people. It's new money. And I don't have anything against people suddenly making money, but they're being led astray in the joy of their new wealth by being talked into buying rubbish by a firm that they're relying on. These firms are relied upon to offer good advice. And what they don't realize is that this isn't good advice. This is lousy advice. And these vulgar displays of wealth that you see being sold for these crazy amounts of money are really wanted, only by people looking for acceptance. They want the famous Hermes bag for $100,000 because they could wear it down the street and people will know it's a $100,000 bag in their social circle. That sort of silly nonsense. And it's not how what we would call old school well-off people used to live. This isn't what they do. If you go to very nice resorts, you don't see Hermes bags except hanging off the arms of people that suddenly just made some money. It's just the way it is. And it's important to talk about this stuff. It's important to point out that this is not what Sotheby's did originally. This isn't what they should be doing now. They're supposed to set the standard, not use their street credentials, so to speak, or their reputation to sucker people in to buy nonsense, to buy crap, to buy mass-produced leather bags and dirty, old jerseys that were worn in a basketball game that was produced somewhere in the Philippines. That's not what they're there for. That's not their game. That's not what they do. And then of course you had the COVID effect, which really made things worse. It was a giant head fake to both firms. This was the funniest thing. When COVID came along, what happened was you ended up with a whole lot of people that had nothing to do. And Sotheby's and Christie's decided they could cash in on it, and it backfired on them badly. And now they're stuck in this trap. Because you have to think about it. During COVID, there were tens and thousands of financially well-off people who could no longer go on vacation. They could no longer go skiing in Stad or Snowmass or Beaver Creek. They weren't hanging out on their yachts in the Caribbean. Eden Rock and St. Bart's was closed during COVID. You couldn't go there. No more cocktail parties in the Hamptons unless they're very, very small affairs. But you could go shopping. And Sotheby's and Christie's both tapped in on this, and Sotheby's went full bore, and they talked people into coming into their business and spending unthinkable amounts of money on trivial toys and baubles and accoutrements. As I said, from sneakers to handbags to watches, and NFTs, and that was all part of of course, the blockchain craze, as I mentioned before. It was sort of like the Beanie Baby fad on steroids, and then COVID ended. And the bored, fickle, newly rich do what they always do. They went back to their lives. They left behind Sotheby's and Christie's, like those one-night stands that everybody had in college, and it was fun but wasn't permanent and just as quickly forgotten. And then the sales volumes all died. What happened? What happened to them? All right, and that's the question. And what's next? Well, Mr. Drahi perhaps can work out his financial issues and keep Sotheby's going, or sell the company outright to UAE investors who I suspect would be happy to buy the place, and then they could really run it into the ground, I suppose. But it would be pocket change for them, and they probably wouldn't really care what happened to the company if they bought it. And or they can go back to doing what they've done for 300 years, selling art and antiques to an ever-changing cyclical market, knowing full well that eventually the cream will rise to the top once again, and hopefully, having learned that it cannot be faked with pandering and hype, they'll get back to doing their regular business. But only time will tell. And that's how I look at it. It's really sort of a screwed up situation. I don't know why these companies went down this road. I think it was a colossal error. I think the idea of trying to turn these auction houses into what they aren't, making them more than what they should be or are, to keep their credibility and their beauty and their reputations. I guess beauty is the wrong word. Keep their reputations together is something they're not thinking about. I think it's sort of a kill, eat, and go sort of attitude, and that it may be the end of these companies. It may not be. I don't know. I haven't seen the books that Mr. Drahi is keeping, and I don't know what his finances are. But it looks very serious at this point. It looks extremely serious. I hope they work it out. I'm not rooting for either company to go under. I want them to get their acts together. But if they don't get back to basics and decide, okay, Sotheby's and Christie's have there's a limit to how big they can get. If they cannot get through their heads and they keep trying to push it into new areas, the Sotheby's and Christie's that is gone. They're gone. They're gone, and they won't be back. It's just going to become a big vendor operation, a big money mill. Their roots and their history will be just crushed, and that'll be the end of it. But let's hope that doesn't happen. They have a role to play in today's market, and I think that they should get their acts together and do it. All right, that's all I have to say on it. I know a number of you think the same thing because I've heard from you in emails. But those are my thoughts on what's going on. I'm pretty familiar with both companies from over the years, and let's hope they get their acts together. And hopefully, I think the best thing for Sotheby's would be Mr. Drahi sold the company to somebody that understands the antique and art market, because I think he's a disaster. Those are my thoughts. Okay, bye-bye.